All right, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So, inshallah, today, let's just first go over what we had done last time, right? Let's go over it really quick. And we talked about women attending the masajid. We also talked about, let's see, the ones that come late to the masjid or come late to the salah, and the rulings that relate to them. Okay. And today, inshallah, we're going to talk about, you see, in English, they basically said imamat in prayer. I don't know how they wrote that, but to be honest, in the beginning, I thought it was an inmate. And then I thought, no, wait a minute, there's something different here. So it's imamat. I mean, I guess they tried. It was a nice try. Okay. So what does that even mean? What is an imamate anyways? So an imama is really to be the imam. Okay, so to be imam means to be the one to lead the prayer. That's the imam. The imam is basically the person that leads the prayer. Okay, so should we actually, when we speak about the person that leads the prayer, do we actually deal with the imam himself? Is there like a specific type of ruling in regards to the imam? The answer is yes. So let's talk about a couple of things. We're going to talk about the importance of being an imam and what privilege they would get. Really, they get a special privilege? Yeah, there's a certain privilege that they would get, like in this dunya or in the hereafter. We'll talk about both, actually. We'll also talk about, well, okay, what are the qualifications for a person to be an imam? Okay. And we'll also talk about who comes in first. Okay. We'll also talk about certain considerations that we might consider, and which is basically the different things that we will consider are important, and therefore we would keep those as, just different conditions later on. And inshallah, we will be also talking, if we had the time, okay, we'll talk about the people that cannot be an imam. Really, there are some certain people they can't even be an imam. Yeah, stay tuned to actually hear that. First of all, let's start talking about what's the importance of being an imam. So, number one, there is a hadith for the Prophet ﷺ, and he said, ثلاثة, look at this hadith, على كثبان المسك يوم القيامة رجل أما قوما وهم okay وهم به راضون. What does that mean? Three persons will be on the hillock of musk on the day of resurrection. The person who leads the people in prayer, and they're pleased with him. Okay. So what is like hillock of musk? Well, hillock of musk is actually like they would be standing on a soil made of musk, so they've got the best smell. I'm personally in love with fragrances in perfumes. Okay, so when you tell me, that would be definitely something I would want to be standing on, and yeah, maybe I can't be an imam, but at least I'll have the intention. Okay. And you're talking about that there would be standing. Il-Kuthban is like soil made of musk. And musk basically is a type of fragrance. Okay, so let's look at the other hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said, Inna lahu min al-ajri mithlu ajri man salla khalfahu. That's definitely a privilege. The reward for the imam is like that of those who perform prayer behind him. You know what that means? That would actually mean the number of people behind praying behind you, you will also get credit on their behalf as well. Credit on their behalf as well. So you're leading, let's say 50 people, you get 50 credits. You lead 100 people, you get 100 credits. You lead, I don't know, guess your Imam al-Haram, that's the number of credits. And only, of course, there are certain conditions, but we'll get there. Okay. Some of the Sahaba used to even say and raise, can you make me the Imam and assign me to be the Imam over my people. Why? Because they know the importance and the honor of that position. So some would actually ask to be the imam. Can I be the imam? Can I be the person to lead in salah? And definitely, because that would be important as a reward. If the person is leading in salah, they would get the reward on Judgment Day. So if you're leading on 50, you get 50 credits. You lead salah on 100 people, you get 100 credits, right, Hudayfa? Okay. And of course, it's quite sad that many times people would avoid being the imam because they would be either too lazy or afraid to make a mistake, or they're probably maybe thinking that it's going to be a sign of being humble if you basically refuse to be the imam and so forth. And we would always say, well, if you know the credit, you know the honor, you know the reward on Judgment Day, then you would have really wanted to race to be the one to be the imam. But that doesn't mean racing to be the imam to somehow degrade and start picking on people's mistakes in salah and even in their position because you would want to envy. No, this is a positive envy. We're speaking about positively envying for a good thing. Therefore, you embrace the right principles to be that person. And certainly the person that is doing that, they would have to perform and show their enthusiasm and to seek the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that when the person wants to be an imam, it's not that they're seeking to somehow get the honor, the praise, the endorsement from people, but they're seeking to get the endorsement from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, seeking the honor and the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not necessarily the people. Because if they were to seek it from the people, sorry, but that would actually be called riya, and the person would actually be punished for it on Judgment Day. Okay, so if I were to have some certain feelings that I was really wanting to get the endorsement from people, should I just avoid being the imam? That way I won't get that sentiment that I was doing it for the people? No. Get into that and later on work on, well, during the time and also later on, inshallah, you will, as long as you keep on working on your intention, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, inshallah, reward you as you are working on it. And inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make you successful to overcome the shaitani spew of riyah. Okay, let's see. Who are the people? So when we're talking about, that's always the importance. Who are the people that would basically mean that they're qualified to be the imam? Number one, the best in Quranic recitation. When we say the best in Quranic recitation, we're talking about a person that reads the Quran properly. In that we mean the person that is capable of reading the Quran with the right letter articulation, with the right tajweed, with the proper, of course, stops and knows how to read the Quran. That's what it means. And without maybe trying to stop frequently because they don't know what they're reading and so forth. Now, if they had as an addition, and let's call it the knowledge in fiqh in Quran, then that's definitely a plus that would give that person, let's call it a higher qualification included with the Quranic recitation. So, okay, you're talking about a person with an Islamic studies degree. Okay. This Islamic studies degree, if we're speaking about Islamic studies degree, not somebody got an Islamic studies degree from Harvard or Cambridge University or SOAS. These degrees are not Islamic studies degrees. They're more as anthropology. They're not Islamic studies degrees. Islamic studies degrees are the degrees that a person studies through a sheikh, studying Quran, studying Hadith, studying Tafsir, and that's what an Islamic studies degree is. Okay, but to get it from SOAS or to get it from Cambridge or to get it from Harvard, that's not an Islamic studies degree. These people studied about Islam and not Islam itself. They won't be capable of giving you fatwa. They won't be capable. They never studied tajweed. They might have studied a couple things here and there, but not enough to actually make them, let's say, get the proper ijazah through a shaykh. Okay, so when we speak about the person that learned the Quran, okay, that would be the person that would come forth first. Okay, then if in addition to that, they had also the ilm al-fiqh, that would give them another endorsement. Okay, in other words, another empowerment in qualification to be at that level. Okay, so what is the evidence for that? The evidence is basically the hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said, Ya ummul qawma aqra'uhum li kitabillah. The Prophet ﷺ said, the one to lead the prayer for the people is the one to basically be the most one to recite the Quran, or let's say the most qualified one in reciting the Quran. So whether that's in memorization, and certainly you want to make sure that the person memorized the most or memorized Quran, or the person read the Quran, meaning the person has the training to read the Quran. But definitely, أقرأهم لكتاب الله would more be a person that memorized the Quran. Okay, or memorized, let's say one memorized 3 juz'u and the other one memorized 15. Then we're going to say the one that memorized 15, you come forth. What are we teaching ourselves here? We're teaching ourselves the importance of Quran. We're teaching the ummah that the one to be in that position of leadership, that position of honor, is basically the person to contain the Quran, to contain the most of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had revealed. Okay, let's see. And certainly, why are we considering the person that had also the Islamic studies degree or in a specific specialty fiqh? So fiqh basically means the person studied the rulings on Islam. Rulings on Islam, we're speaking about whether in worship, transactions, marriage, possibly different things. We're talking about all the different chapters on fiqh. Okay. And when we're speaking about all the different chapters on fiqh, we're speaking about studying in the undergrad. They would study pretty much, let's say, we're studying fiqh of worship, and the fiqh of worship would be in almost 4 years. Okay, that's fiqh of worship. And it would be approximately, we're talking about, let's say, fiqh of worship, like fiqh of salah. It would be in almost, I calculated it, almost 120 hours. Almost 120 hours. Just fiqh salah. Okay? Just fiqh salah. Almost 120 hours. So if you're an institution studying fiqh of worship in just, 15 hours, 13 hours, 30 hours, and you're given an Islamic studies degree, sorry, that's not an Islamic studies degree. We call that as an ESL class. Okay. So just, kind of like an ESL class, kind of like just to remove jahl. Okay. But it should be, we're speaking about a lot of studying. Okay. If we're then talking about the other subjects of fiqh, we're speaking about fiqh of transactions. We're speaking about fiqh of marriage, divorce. We're speaking about the fiqh al-udhiyah and things that relate to slaughter. We're speaking about the fiqh as-sayd and all of the things that relate to that. We're speaking about al-ahkam al-sultaniyah, the fiqh of governance, the fiqh. So those are all just different things that we would study in fiqh. Fiqh al-libas, the dress, and all of that, we would basically study it as fiqh classes. My specialty is in fiqh, and that's what I absolutely enjoy talking about. Just the word fiqh, it's like you're giving me the biggest pie ever, just to look at, just to sniff. And it just feels like just the aroma of the word fiqh. It just gives me a different sensation. Okay, let's get into that into the other conditions. So if you said that the one to read and have fiqh would be the one to come forth and come first, why did he say أقرأهم لكتاب الله? So at the time, during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the one to know the most Quran, because they actually had the ilm in Lugha Arabiya, because they knew Lugha Arabiya in the Arabic language, and they were capable of, just by reading the words, they knew exactly what it meant, okay? And they knew exactly how to derive rulings from it. So in other words, it was enough to learn the Quran, and he didn't need to say no fiqh or study fiqh or any of that, because the fiqh was in the Quran that they had learned. Okay, that's all that was needed, that is. Okay, and just by learning the Quran, they learned along with it. That would be fiqh, that would be all those different rulings that basically would be derived from the Quran. Okay, so what if we had those that were basically on the same level of qira'ah? Everybody is a hafid here, okay? Everybody is a hafid here. Then in that situation, we would say, okay, who's the one to have the most fiqh then? Then we would continue to just say, okay, then why did we say fiqh? Because the Prophet ﷺ said, فَإِنْ كَانُوا فِي الْقِرَاءَةِ سَوَاء فَأَعْلَمُهُمْ بِالسُّنَّةِ. He said, if if people are equal in recitation of the Quran, then the one with the greatest knowledge in Sunnah should lead them in prayer. Okay, wait a minute. So we're speaking about knows the most Quran, and then let's say they're all at the same level. Then we're going to be putting in a competition in Sunnah. Wait a minute. So Sunnah is knowing the tradition of the Prophet ﷺ, knowing about the traditions of the Prophet ﷺ, and which would basically include the meaning, okay, of what the Prophet ﷺ had said, what the Prophet ﷺ had done, what were different reports about the Prophet ﷺ, and that's basically the person to know more about the details of Islam. So if a person knew the Quran perfectly, then we're going to go to stage 2, which is, well, learning the hadith. Okay, أعلمهم بالسنة. So why that? Well, because during Salah, the person is going to certainly need the recitation, but they also need the different rulings that relate to Salah, that require the person knows the practical Quran. The practical Quran is what? Is actually Sunnah. There's two sides of revelation. There's one side of the revelation, which is the recited words, and there's the other side of the revelation, which is the practical words, or at least the practical part of revelation, which is how the Prophet ﷺ had lived the words of al-Wahy, and then that whether lived it in action or whether demonstrated it in explanation through words, or whether he had it was reported on him and reported things that he had done or accepted or approved or rejected or etc. That's all considered sunnah. Okay, if all were
Sorry, Dr. Aisha, for pausing
go
you there.
ahead, dear.
Yes. This is just my personal preference.
Okay.
So, like you mentioned, if you're, let's say you have so many scholars in the room, mashallah, they all have the knowledge of the Quran, then obviously the next step is the person that has the most fiqh. But personally, I love it when an imam has a very sweet voice. So I would think, say, that's why it's good to like attend classes, but I would think it's better for somebody with a very sweet voice to lead the prayer. So, for example, there's a particular mosque that I attend here in Canada. I would literally drive 20 minutes to that mosque. Why? Because I love the recitation of the Imam. I absolutely love his recitation. And it's, I don't know, I just want to go to that masjid because of that person. So,
Okay,
yes,
let me say one thing.
yeah.
The Prophet ﷺ was overhearing the qira'ah of Abu Musa al-Ash'ari once. And the Prophet ﷺ was hearing the recitation. Abu Musa al-Ash'ari did not know that the Prophet ﷺ was listening to his recitation. Then the Prophet ﷺ tells Abu Musa that he has mizmaran min mazamiri Dawood, Ali Dawood, that he has the flute or the melody of Prophet Dawood alayhi salam in his recitation. Okay, and then Abu Musa says, لو علمت بك لحبرته لك تحبيرا. If I would have known that you were listening and overhearing my recitation, I would have even beautified it even more. Now, here's one thing. There's no doubt that the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man lam yataghanna, man laysa minna, man lam yataghanna bil Quran." The Prophet ﷺ had said, "The ones that do not beautify the recitation, the Quranic recitation, that is, they're not part of us." What does that mean? It is definitely a preferred thing that one would have a beautiful voice. But if the beautiful voice is at the expense of a proper recitation to mean proper qira'ah, to mean proper wording, proper articulation, proper stops, etc., then that beautiful voice would actually be haram. They would be held accountable for it. But if the beautiful voice is taking in consideration with all the different rulings of qira'ah and the right articulation, then that's definitely a plus. Okay, then that's definitely a plus. And certainly, well, there's nothing wrong with possibly, like you said, you would drive 20 minutes because that Imam's qira'ah is just a beautiful qira'ah, and possibly even with the right, rulings of tajweed, etc. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Okay, and definitely, the qira'ah that has a beautiful voice, it will affect your heart, it will affect you. We are uh, influenced by the melody itself. If I were to make a sad melody, you would become sad. If I were to make a happy melody, you would definitely feel happy. If I were to make a melody that is disturbing, it doesn't need any it doesn't need any intelligence to recognize, even if you may not understand the language. Okay, even if you may not understand the language, you would say that that the person is singing a sad song or a happy song, or just the music itself actually has an effect. In fact, Imam al-Ghazali had said, he was, something like this. He was actually talking about in al-Madhab al-Shafi'i was probably the most, I don't know why, but al-Madhab al-Shafi'i was the most, and it's called fiqh al-istima' and fiqh al-sama'. Okay, the fiqh of al-sama', you would think that it's related to seeking ilm, but no. Fiqh al-sama' is actually relating to listening to music, or even nasheed, and music, whether we're speaking about lyrics or whether we're speaking about the actual tune. And Shafi'i madhab, I don't know why, but Shafi'i madhab would be interesting to really learn why, but I don't really have the answer to it. But there is, I guess, a specific consideration for that. Anyhow, so Al-Ghazali unlike many other scholars, well, I mean, Ibn Hazm even went farther, but Al-Ghazali had considered certain rulings, certain regulations, and that was more lenient on the different instruments. Okay, I don't want to get off topic too much, but in general, he basically used the word, and he said, if somebody is not moved by music, he said, تبلدت مشاعره. What is it, taballud? In other words, his own sentiments, his own feelings had become stiff. Does that mean we have to be moved by music? Or what does that mean? No, you have to hear the context of why he said that. So the context was the Prophet ﷺ was with a group of Sahaba, happens to have along some of the women basically be on the caravan. So they would be sitting inside, kind of, you've seen it on, Aladdin movie. They would be kind of like a square thing on top of the hunchback and the camel's hump, and it would be over there, and the woman would basically be sitting inside, and all of this is basically covering her from the sun and all of that. Anyhow, okay, so the women inside would basically be holding on to the camel, and Anjasha, there was the Sahabi, he was African descent. His name was Anjasha. Anjasha had a beautiful and a very melodious voice, very beautiful, and he would sing. And I'll tell you, my father used to be a shepherd, and he had a flute, and he would tell me that the sheep would listen to the melody, and then they would actually eat better whenever there was music being played for them. Okay. And that's the same thing, that these camels, when they were hearing the melody that Anjasha was singing, they would go faster and faster and faster because they were enjoying the sound of music. Okay. Then the Prophet ﷺ tells Anjasha, he tells him, Ruwaydan, slow down. And he was telling him why lutfa, or what is that? It was rifqan bil qawarir. Rifqan bil qawarir. The qarura is basically a flask. Okay. And then the scholars had differences of opinions. Was he talking about, it's a metaphor for sure. What's a flask? A flask is basically like a glass pitcher. Okay. Like a glass pitcher. And he was saying, Ruwaydan rifqan bil qawarir. Easy on the flasks. They will break. In other words, you're going too fast. And the women that are hanging on to the camel's hump, as you go faster, that's going to require certainly, more power to make sure you're not falling off of it. So he was telling them to slow down because they're not going to have the power. And so we're going to be starting to see women flying out of those caravans. Okay. So the Prophet was telling them, Rifqan bil qawarir, just be easy. Now, out of that, Al-Ghazali said, if a person is not moved by music, then their sentiments were actually stiff. Okay. Now, when you look at that, you would say the Prophet ﷺ said, if you don't make a melody reading the Quran, you're not part of us. And the Prophet ﷺ encouraged people making melody, but not the melody that is at the expense of reading with proper rulings of tajweed. What is tajweed? The tajweed is basically the way the Prophet ﷺ had recited the Quran. And the way the Prophet ﷺ had recited the Quran is the way that Jibreel alayhi salam had taught the Prophet ﷺ to recite the Quran in that way. Okay. So if a person is reading the Quran with a proper tajweed, with a proper recitation, then that melodious voice is definitely part of our instinct to also want to seek, to also enjoy. Okay, so it's part of our instinct to actually enjoy a beautiful sound. I do have a complete lecture on music on YouTube. Look it up. I don't want to make it into the rulings of music. Okay, let's see. If they're all the same level of qira'ah, then hijrah. Hijrah. So hijrah is like what? Migration? But anyhow, the ones that migrated from Mecca to Medina don't exist anymore because they all died. Right. But this is basically talking about the person leaving the place of shirk and going for the place of Islam. Really? Leaving the place of shirk and going to the place of Islam? So is it considered a place of Islam that Malaysia is 67% Muslim? It is. Okay. Well, here's another privilege. Let's keep going. This is going exciting. And if they're all at the same level of qira'ah, fiqh, and hijrah. Okay. So in other words, they're all at the same level. And we're basically, let's say, at a masjid, and we wanted to do the imama. And here we go. We've got a resident, and those would be basically al-ansar, for example, al-muhajirin, or the masakin like us, okay, coming in. And we've got everybody is a hafid al-Quran. Everybody is Islamic studies degree. Everybody is basically living and moved from we have a lot of people from Australia, by the way, a lot of people from UK as well that came from UK. So coming into basically a Muslim country to stay away from all the fitna right there. Okay, then what are we going to consider now? We're going to consider the eldest in age. Eldest in age? What difference does that make? Why do we have to give a privilege for somebody that's older? Doesn't that make them weaker? No, that doesn't make them weaker, because a person that is older certainly may be physically weaker, but their experience is longer. And the Prophet ﷺ had taught us to respect the elders, and that respect and honor for the elders is actually part of adab, is part of the Muslim mannerisms, and certainly respecting the elders as, for example, not talking over them, or possibly listening to what they're saying, or possibly giving them the privilege to be the imam, or possibly giving them the privilege to probably take a seat before you or eating before you. All of that is part of actually giving them the respect and giving them the honor. This is giving the elders the honor and making sure that we embrace this. This is part of Islam. Okay, and certainly, if a person is older, the distraction and learning how to make and bring focus is definitely better in an older person than a younger person. The older you are, the better you're at your focus in what you're doing, and the less of dunya you are connected to, the older you are. There was this saying by Umar ibn al-Khattab, but it's not authentic, but it's mentioned in the books of Tazkiyah, that he was making the dua to have the faith of al-ajaiz, of the elderly and the seniors, to have his faith like the elderly and the seniors, because they would basically be so confident in their faith that it becomes, with all these years, it becomes unshakable. Pretty strong. That's it. You would talk to them and they would, there's no way for you to get past them. I remember my grandmother. My grandmother was a Catholic nun for 17 years. And I remember one day, I took it upon myself, I'm going to prove to my grandmother. So here we are. She had her own Bible in Spanish. I don't speak fluent Spanish, but I know some. But anyhow, so I got my English copy and she got her Spanish copy, and I proved to her through the Bible that the Prophet ﷺ was actually prophesized and that Islam was the true religion. At the end, instead of her making the Shahada, she insisted that yes, Islam is the true religion, but she doesn't want to make the Shahada because she had devoted herself to Jesus Christ for all these many years. She was 76 years old. She said, I devoted myself, she said that she had devoted herself to Jesus Christ for all these years and that she wasn't going to be giving it up now. And I said, so you recognize as much as I tried, and she was like, you are actually right. Muhammad is a prophet of Allah. You are right. Islam is the true religion, but I can't give up my faith right now. And she died as a Catholic. As much as I tried. إنك لا تهدي من أحببت ولكن الله يهدي من يشاء. That's it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was the one to oversee her heart, oversee everything. And I'll never forget that day when, she told me that. I was like, but grandma, you recognize this, it, you're not dead. There's a privilege for you to actually make it to Jannah, etc. That's it. It was impossible. Now, at the end, respecting the elderly, I guess this is, to get me out of the sentiments before I get too emotional about this. Okay. At the end, respecting the elderly is actually part of Islam that is to be taken seriously, whether in giving them a privilege or whether in respecting and honoring their experience, or whether in different forms of giving them possibly the precedence over you, whether in prayer, whether in certain things in dunya, or whether it's a spot, or whether it's listening to them. All of that is actually part of Islam. And definitely teach it to your children, because if you teach it to your children and how they need to deal with their grandmothers, then they will also learn how to do it to you when you get older as well. Okay, let's see. And what's the evidence on that? The Prophet ﷺ said, يَا أُمُّ الْقَوْمَ أَقْرَأُهُمْ لِكِتَابِ اللَّهِ فَإِنْ كَانُوا فِي الْقِرَاءَةِ سَوَاء فَأَعْلَمُهُمْ بِالسُّنَّةِ فَإِنْ كَانُوا فِي السُّنَّةِ سَوَاء then فأقدمهم هجرة فإن كانوا في الهجرة سواء فأقدمهم سنا. The one that is most versed in the Quran should act as the imam for the people. But if they are equally versed in reciting it, then the one who has the most knowledge in regards to the Sunnah would be the next person. If they're equal in regarding to the Sunnah, then the earliest one to immigrate to Medina to lead in prayer. If they're equal to that is in regarding an immigration, then the eldest one is to lead the prayer. Okay. All right, let's see. Ibn Taymiyyah comments on that. Let's see the comment that he had said. He said the Prophet ﷺ had preceded the most honorable to be with the one, or for the one that basically has the knowledge in the Quran, and then in a Sunnah, and then if they're equal in the level of knowledge, then the one that basically comes in action and puts the action in application of Islam, and then the one that basically had put in with their own will to actually come forth in applying Islam, and with the pious action. In other words, we're talking about things that we would also say. So what does that mean? So right now we don't have people that made hijrah per se. So we're not talking about somebody making hijrah from, I don't know, from the US to Malaysia or Indonesia or whatever country, but we're actually talking about the people to show piety even longer in their life. Okay, to show piety, like they have a history. They have a history of practicing Islam for longer periods. They have a history of putting in that will of implementing good and pious action for a longer period. Okay. And finally, the one that basically was older in age. Okay. When you say the older in age, and the elderly, that's basically a person certainly wasn't something that they had invested in. They didn't create themselves earlier, but at least we have to respect and honor the experience. And this is extremely important. I think we have to, as a society, we have to work a lot in teaching. Before, I think we learned a lot better in honoring experience, but during our time today, possibly because of technology, the newer something is, the more expensive, basically the better product, etc. And that gave this subliminal message that the younger generation is at a better place. The younger person is to basically be given, let's say, a better value, and not necessarily the older. But before, we used to honor experience more. We used to honor, and we were trained to honor experience, to honor age, to honor things that lasted longer, and consider that as a place of value. So we're seeing, I guess, the type of life that we're living in, and how it redefined value for us. Redefined value, whether the value of people, or whether it's the value of experience, or whether it's the value of the things around us. And that to consider something's newer, that means it's better. And not that if it has proven quality, if it had proven the genuine side of it, that's basically to be considered as the highest value. Okay. And this is extremely important, is to teach the younger generation the definition of value, that the true value comes with those that had shown genuine commitment, determination, those that had shown determination, and certainly in action, or in seeking ilm, or certainly in connection with the Quran and Sunnah, and certainly longer in their commitment. Okay, let's see. So there are other things that we would also consider as a person that is to be given the privilege to be the imam. And that's the first one right there, is al-Masjid al-Ratib. What is that? It's basically the person that was assigned by perhaps maybe the government, maybe the board of that masjid. He was assigned. And there has to be, for the whole system, that they would assign the imam. And, working in America many times, and working with the board members and all of that, at many times you would see a lot of different things that would influence how those imams are chosen. Sometimes the qualification of that imam is chosen. Sometimes that's to be taken in consideration. But the problem is, some of those board members are actually not qualified to really review the qualification, whether that person, what makes a qualification. So you would see certain people, they don't even understand that a person that probably studied at, I don't know, Chicago University and studied Islamic studies there, even if they had a PhD, that does not necessarily mean that they had the fiqh. Knowing some words in Arabic here and there, that doesn't necessarily make that person a knowledgeable person in the Quran and the meaning of the Quran. A person that probably had an Islamic studies degree in probably some institute or probably some center is not necessarily equal to a person that studied it in those in intensive programs where they're really studying it to, cover to cover and studying it at a strong level and all of that. Those are not the same level. And someone that studied the Quran, for example, how to read it is not necessarily a person that is equal to a person that memorized it properly or got the ijazah. A person that probably has the ijazahs in 10 qira'at is not equal to a person that only has an ijazah in one qira'ah. Anyhow, so that's one problem. Another thing is that a lot of those that are probably the board members, they're probably yes, they're unfortunately exactly the ones that are the board members. Many times it depends on which masjid you're talking about. If you're talking about Arabi masajid, it's usually the people that have the money are the ones that are, coming forth and deciding on behalf of the whole masjid. They have the money. If you're talking about Pakistani and Indian masajid, the ones that are probably doctors, engineers, they will be the ones to have the say, even though they're actually not qualified in Islamic studies. They're not qualified in Islamic studies, but they end up making basically the fatwa, okay, in what the masjid is basically what the masjid and what the imam is to talk about, believe it or not. I've had people that are qualified, believe it or not, people that are qualified actually instructed by the board not to talk about hijab, for example, because it was offensive to many. Not to talk about certain Islamic topics because that was probably a distractor. So who was going to be determining that was going to be the board. The board was the one to determine what topics to talk about. The board is going to determine who is going to be the qualified imam. And I've seen masajid where they would have a qualified person basically get laid off, and a person that was not qualified actually be chosen instead of that person because they felt that that person, one, whether had the looks for it, or two, maybe had maybe the sense of humor to deal with the younger generation, etc. I'm not saying it's not important, but why can't we hire, for example, a person? If you want someone to deal with the younger generation, fair enough, but not at the expense of everyone else. There has to be a consideration of what and how we choose the imam, who's really the qualified person, and so forth. Anyhow, that's a whole different topic to talk about. And here the sister is saying Somali community typically chooses the eldest. Well, if they have the ilm and if they had memorized the Quran, but when you talk about the Somali community, everybody is a hafiz. Okay, so that becomes really hard to choose from all of those because mashallah they all memorize the Quran. We're speaking about that generation. Everybody memorized the Quran and everybody was taking those classes, the classes that they were supposed to be taking at the Duxi. So I can relate to why they would choose the eldest, because they would end up, I guess, within this category. So I can see where the Somali community is coming from. So I guess that's a different situation. I think the Somali community is actually doing the best, to be honest, and in Minnesota is actually doing the best in their masajid in considering their imams, in considering the teachers, in considering the classes. I must admit, I think they're doing the best by far. The challenges are definitely too big and not easy at all, especially that, the Somali community you're seeing, one, many of them are dependent on government assistance. Government assistance is going to also mean subsidized housing. Subsidized housing is usually in the lower class area. Lower class area basically has a high crime rate, high drug rate. So that becomes a big challenge for the imams that are in the area that basically has a high drug rate, high crime rate, high gain rate, and all of that. How are we going to bring them to the masajid? So some Somali masajid basically suggested that they would have basketball tournaments, and they would basically have areas to play and areas, yes, in the masjid. Kind of like an area to basically have the Muslim children and the Muslim youth, instead of going outside of the masjid, basically create a ghetto type of thing within this neighborhood to isolate them from all the other outside influences. So they were trying that as an option, but trust me, the wave and the challenges are bigger than what they could do. To be honest, Allah ya Rabbi, Allah ya Rabbi wafiqhum, and it's not easy. It is not easy at all. And that's why I would really suggest move if you cannot live in an area that is predominantly Muslim, and I mean predominantly Muslim, away from all of those influences. Please, please, please go back to a Muslim country, find a Muslim country, because the influence is too big. Even if you end up selling spices and your children basically living on the simple food and all of that, at least you get the akhirah and you are away from the different fitan. Stay away from the different fitan. Preserve your deen, and preserving your deen is more important than preserving your dunya. Whether we're speaking about dunya to mean privileges in colleges, or privileges in getting a job, or privileges in making money, or whether we're speaking about dunya, houses and cars and all of that, get your akhirah, because you want to keep in mind, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Ad-dunya sijnul mu'min wa jannatul kafir." This life is sijnul mu'min. This life is an imprisonment for a believer, and it's a Jannah for the disbeliever. Don't go running after the kafir's Jannah at the expense of your Jannah. Don't go for the kafir's Jannah. Go for your Jannah, which would actually mean there's a trade-off. You need to give up on dunya and get to your akhirah. This is extreme. I know it's not always necessarily easy for everyone, but there's no way that you're going to think, okay, that Jannah is an easy thing to get to anyways. Okay, let's move on. How much is an imam making? If they're assigned by the masjid, how much are they making? The amount that they're making depends on the masjid. It ranges between $2,800, a monthly allowance, and it can go up to, depends on that person, if they were famous, if they basically had a PhD, depends on the degree as well, a master's, a bachelor's, and a PhD, they basically vary. And it also depends on whether they had English language, other languages, maybe Somali, maybe Spanish, whatever it is, depending on the language, depending on the masjid. Every single masjid, there are bigger masajid that basically have a bigger budget. It can go up to, believe it or not, up to $6,000 a month. Yes, some imams, I'm talking about, that's probably the max, but yes, it can go up to that much a month, depending on what they're doing, activities, what the person, probably their qualification. And that's why you would say maybe Imam X or Y maybe leaving possibly maybe Tennessee going to Texas, or possibly Oklahoma maybe going to Texas, probably, or maybe Chicago or whatever, because other masajid would basically give them an offer of a number of maybe income if they were to come to their masajid. So they would give up that other masjid who's probably paying them maybe $3,000 a month, and the other masjid is offering $6,000 a month. So yes, definitely. Okay, so just to let you see what we're looking at in terms of income, what would they be doing? Is it wrong to pay, let's say we're hiring a person to do قراءة القرآن in Salat al-Tarawih just for a month, okay? They would usually get a stipend of almost $2,500 or $3,000 for doing Salat al-Tarawih, okay? Oh, we're talking about, roughly $2,500, $3,000 for like a stipend, an honorarium for that. We had a higher graduation rate and in every profession. Well, definitely. I mean, of course, every single field, a person that is an engineer, of course, depending on their experience, depending on of course, their investment, all of that, that's going to basically give them a certain number that, of course, the company, the masjid, whatever organization is basically going to consider that we need their service, and this is the amount we are paying for their service. Okay, let's see. Number two, what if we're not talking about something that is like an organized masjid? Okay, we're speaking about something that is just at home. Okay, so the one that owns the home, is the one to be the imam. So he's the owner for that house. He's the one, and this is extremely important. I want you to look at this one. When you look at the owner, the person that owns the home, to be given that privilege, that's in order to reveal a couple things. Okay. Let's do that in this way. Why is that important? Because when you show and when you had a history, number one, of owning property, or two, had a history of, even when we're speaking about life, okay, we're speaking about experience, we're speaking about history of probably seeking a degree, seeking a number of different possibly positions, whatever it is, and you actually had shown determination, all of that. Giving respect to the person that owns the property, or giving respect to the person that basically is considered the sultan. I want you to look at this word. The word sultan actually means kind of like a king, a sultan, okay? But this isn't talking about a sultan, a person that has a turban over their head and some kind of jewelry in the middle. This isn't talking about that sultan, but this is all actually talking about the person in authority, okay? And therefore, respecting the person in authority is part of Islam. That's why the Prophet ﷺ had said, لا يؤم الرجل في بيته ولا في سلطانه إلا بإذنه. That the one to basically be the imam, let no one basically lead in the presence of the actual leader within that household. So what does that mean? Whether we're speaking about this person was the assigned the assigned authority, the assigned person by, let's say, the board, or whether this person is basically the authority within this household, or whether this person is the authority possibly on campus at the university or whatever, all of that is to be given respect. What do we mean by respect? whether respect in letting them proceed in being the imams, or whether showing respect even in listening to their advice and giving that honor to the experience that they basically had contained. Respecting the elders is extremely important. Respecting the experience, respecting what these people had shown in their successes is also part of Islam. Respecting the value of success, respecting the value of time, respecting the value of genuinity is actually part of Islam. Teaching the children, especially the younger generation, such values is extremely important to lead them to success and to lead them to seeing the true value in order to embrace it. In order to embrace it, they first have to honor it. They first have to recognize it. They first have to recognize its value. And it isn't until they recognize its value will they want to actually mimic it. Will they want to mimic it and actually be as that? If they don't recognize its value, then they would not want to replicate it. They would not want to mimic it. They would not want to, in any shape or form, embrace it or even attempt to be like it. Okay, let's see. Al-Khattabi. Who's Al-Khattabi? Al-Khattabi is a scholar, and this scholar actually had done Sharh Sunan Abi Dawud. Okay, and this is what he said. He said, this hadith means that the whole householder is worthier to lead the prayer in his house if he has the juristic knowledge and the knowledge of recitation that qualify him to establish prayer properly. Okay, so we're not just honoring just the property owner, okay, or the person that has the property just because they have the money and just like because they basically are in ownership of the place, but we're also supposed to be considering. So if the property owner knows that this visitor, okay, that they basically have memorized the Quran, that they basically have better tajweed, etc., then we would proceed with, would be part of the adab of the Quran to have the property owner basically put forth and ask the person that memorized the Quran to lead instead of them. Okay, that would be out of honoring the Quran. Okay, so that's basically important to just keep in mind. Number two, what we would see is that it shows that the imama and being the imam, and certainly the importance of it, and all of those that basically keep the ummah intact. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically taught us Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, and he said, and even praised Ibadur Rahman, sorry about that, but praised Ibadur Rahman, praised the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَالَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. What does that mean? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had endorsed those that would say, and those who say, our Lord, grant us from amongst our wives and offspring comfort to our eyes and make us a leader, that is an example for the righteous. Beautiful translation right there. Beautiful translation. But wait a minute, يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا. Is that what they're saying, or is that what they're really trying to embrace? Or is that what they're also trying to probably seek? That's what they're seeking. This is also resembling what they were seeking. What are they seeking? They're seeking to make a family that is centered around Islam, that is centered around Quran, that is centered around Quran to the point that they want to be the leaders, the pioneers. I want my boys to be the pioneers that would one day be the pioneers to lead in good, to basically be the scholars that would be a good example to teach Islam to others, that would be the doer to basically teach Islam to others, teach Islam to whether it's Muslims, non-Muslims. I would want my daughter as well to be the good girl that would be the shaykha to teach women and be the one to be confident in teaching Islam and have the ilm, not just confidence with no ilm, but actually be the imam. وَجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. Why وَجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, not وَجْعَلْنَا لِلنَّاسِ, for example? When you say وَجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا, that's actually saying the standard that they're seeking is a high standard. Because when you say وَجْعَلْنَا لِلنَّاسِ إِمَامًا, make us be a leader for all the people, the leader for all the people, that's basically going to be, the standard has a certain lower standard because you're going to be leading all the people, kind of like a president. But to seek to be, no, I want to be for al-muttaqin, for the ones that have the highest faith, I want to be their imam. So I want to be the highest level of taqwa, and I want to be even at a higher level of taqwa than those of taqwa. That's what it means. Like, there are these people of taqwa, make my children, my spouse, this ayah, be the highest, at the highest level of taqwa, and let them be the ones to be in the highest position. Be the highest position of their faith and the highest position in the leadership. So this isn't any type of leadership. No, I want them to be at the highest level of leadership. In what level of leadership? To be the leaders over al-muttaqin. Over al-muttaqin. And certainly, what does that mean? What is that inspiring us to believe and or even look for? This is to let us basically even teach our children that to aspire to be a person of leadership in faith, leadership in Islamic knowledge, that's basically the biggest aspiration. Yes, it's important to have high grades in mathematics and literacy. That's important to be the A student in school, definitely. But my first and most important aspiration in competition is that you're best in your deen. That's the most important thing, is that you're highest in your deen. Okay, let's see. Why?
Sorry, Dr. Aisha, before you proceed, I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
The topic we're doing today, is it being an imam on a public level, or does this apply to individual homes as well? So you're like a family of 12 and then you want to pray. Does the order of choosing who the imam is going to be, is this relevant to the home?
Yeah, absolutely. But if the dad is there, then the dad is going to be the imam.
Okay, because sometimes
I
don't know if it's a cultural thing. Usually they let children lead the prayer, especially if they already memorized the Quran.
So if the children already memorize the Quran, then we're going to have and the dad is not there, then we're going to have the eldest brother. Then we're going to have the oldest brother basically be the one. If the oldest brother is not there, then the younger, then basically we're going to have, okay, we've got a 20-year-old, we've got an 18-year-old, we've got a 17-year-old. We're going to go, oh, 20-year-old is not here, they're basically at work, then 18-year-old, you're going to come forth. Teaching the children respecting leadership and honoring leadership is part of making unity. This is extremely important. How to let the younger brother respect the older brother, that's part of Islam. How to let the younger brother respect the older brother, not to mean that the older brother is going to abuse this respect. and abuse their authority, but to tell them, no, you got to respect, and to let the older brother also show that, listen, this respect is not necessarily just giving you just a free pass, but that's actually to also ask you to be responsible and to act responsibly. That, okay, I'm asking your younger brother to obey you, listen to you, and basically respect you, etc. But you as an older brother, I want you to be there when they have their maybe their tantrums, or maybe their low moments, or possibly their moments when they don't know how to figure something out. You come in and be the director and be the manager. Teach them what you had known. Let them see the experience and teach them what they fail to learn. And you come in as a mentor. So, in other words, what are you doing there? You're letting the elder basically present responsibility, present mentorship, present what it means to basically show determination, show patience, and show commitment. And for the younger ones that probably yet did not learn all of that, they need to see it from you as an older person. But at the same time, we would basically, bring in this bond. So even if it's brother and sister and all of that, I know some Muslim families, Palestinian, Somali, we get a lot of children, but we also always have to teach this bond that Islam teaches. This isn't some kind of, oh, this is tradition. No, this is Islamic tradition. This isn't tradition to mean backwards. The society today teaches us to see tradition as if it is old, therefore lacking value. No, Islam teaches us that this is tradition, that it contains value, that it contains the value of unity, the value of experience, the value of enriching one another, the value of embracing one another, to be able to bring the best within our homes. Not only our own, let's call it our smaller home, but this is actually talking about the bigger home as well. So the sister is asking, does the imam's salary need to be public? I personally would not recommend that it would be public. Why not? Because al-awam, the general people, don't necessarily have the adab to respect and understand who the imam is and what the imam really carries. Most people, and I would say, maybe I can give it to you in a different way. I ran a daycare at one point because we really struggled financially. Okay. And in the daycare, I'm specialized in Islamic studies. I couldn't just have the kids be in my daycare and not do anything, or just give them food and, just, I don't know, teach them about colors and all of that. No, it's, teaching Islam is me. That's what I enjoy doing. That's what I always enjoyed doing. When we basically told the masajid at the time to for me to basically hold classes for women, etc., and that they would pay me for those classes. They basically said they had walls to fix, carpet to fix, and that, in fact, they literally said, we don't benefit from teaching women. This is real, okay? So in order, my husband, of course, was also doing his his job, but our incomes were not adding up to be efficient. So I had to run a daycare, ran the daycare, but in the daycare, I was actually teaching the kids Quran, and teaching Islamic studies and teaching the kids how to read the Quran. So they were really, I've had kids actually learn how to read the Quran, wallahi al-azim, in almost 3 months. This is real. And they were only 3-year-olds. In 3 months, they were at 0. And in 3 months, every single day, we were like, okay, we're going to do our Qaida Nuraniya, we're going to do this, we're going to start reading. And in 3 months, they were capable of reading Quran. Of course, not at a fluent level, but they were capable of reading it. This is Fatha, this is Dhamma. They were capable of reading every single day we were holding classes. Anyhow, I've had people actually come and say, I'm going to put my son in your daycare, but you teach Islam there, so you should basically not charge me for having my son go to your daycare. Believe it or not. Why? Because you're teaching Islam. You're supposed to be doing that for the sake of Allah. I certainly am doing it for the sake of Allah, but who's going to pay my bills? Who's going to pay for the food? Who's going to pay for all of that? And that's what most people don't understand. Most people assume that the imam is supposed to be somehow getting rizq coming from sama, coming like that. They don't recognize that imams, that they also struggle with bills, rent, just different expenses, exactly the same way that you would struggle. And that if we don't actually pay them for the position that they are holding, that it's not fair for the ummah, and certainly not fair for everyone either, because they're actually busy doing this job and occupying a service, whether a service is giving Islamic studies, doing fatwas, answering people's questions, or whatever it is, that's part of covering a service. Now, that's one side. The other thing is that, would I necessarily make it public? The answer is no, because keeping that honor for the imam is important, just as you are not exposing your salary to everyone. Why should the imam's salary be something that is public information? That's supposed to be personal between the board, which is the group that is hiring the imam, and the imam himself. How much he's making, how much he deserves, and whether it's 1099 or whether it's all those different things about taxes, that's supposed to be personal. It shouldn't be public information, because if we're going to be making it public information, that makes the imam be public property. That's not fair. The imam is doing a service. He doesn't become public property where everyone has the right to oversee this imam's personal life. And this is one thing that many times people confuse. They want to know about the imam's wife and what she does and the children. And this imam becomes, yarhamkumullah, and this imam becomes basically public information for everyone. And their spaces, they become spaces that people don't honor and don't respect. They would want to trespass because they think that the imam is basically public property. And that's not fair. Definitely not fair. The children, the imam is struggling with their children, exactly. The sheikh, they're struggling with their children the same way that you're struggling with your children. If something goes wrong with any of his kids, that doesn't make that imam a failure. It just makes you remember that Prophet Nuh alayhi salam also struggled with his own son. Doesn't make him a failure, but it just makes that son a failure. That they didn't use the privilege that their father or their mother was a scholar, that they basically had. They had the ilm, and they could have actually seek the privilege to learn from that ilm, but instead they basically did not recognize it. And this is really sad that at many times, the children that have parents that are, let's say, an imam or ulama or etc., that the ilm that they would deliver, they start hearing it as white noise, because they're constantly hearing their parents' voices basically talking. Even when they start presenting ilm, they're hearing it as white noise. That's very sad. It's extremely sad. You wanted to say something and we could see iPhone 6. Go ahead.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
For Imam, why he deserve to take salary if ayat of zakat make العاملين عليها deserve to take from zakah? So this is awla, isn't it? For Imam to take a salary?
Well, the evidence for the Imam taking a salary is not actually coming from al-amilina alayha.
Yeah. I'm saying like qiyas. If the عاملين عليها
we didn't
deserve
need
to
to
take.
go that far because we have direct evidence from the Quran. كتاب إن حق ما أخذتم عليه أجر كتاب الله. We've got a direct ayah that basically says the most worth thing that you would take a reward or an ajr for and a pay for is basically the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that's the most valuable thing. You're willing to pay for all these different things out there, but you're not willing to pay for the Quran.
Yeah, but the people doesn't know. The public
people don't know. The people don't know. People expect you to do everything, especially, services. It's like, oh, this is, where does it come from? It comes from the society, Muslim society. We basically had al-awqaf. Al-awqaf used to basically be covering all the expenses that regards to the masjid, whether electricity or whether, to basically run the masjid. But then in the US, in Canada, whatever it is, those awqaf doesn't exist. Those awqafs don't exist. If that awqaf doesn't exist now, that's left for the society to basically create this funding and ensure that the imam is paid. Most people don't recognize that the imam is not actually doing things for free. They just think, oh, this person is a nice person, and they don't even recognize it. It's like, do you ever consider that they have expenses to pay? And even, I've had families actually say, this imam is basically has a very good car. So therefore, he's making enough money to buy this car. Yeah. Should the imam actually have a good car like that? Well, why not? Why not? Why not give the imam? I mean, we pay doctors. Okay, we pay doctors and we pay engineers. You can pay somebody to come and do plumbing services for you $400 and $200 just for the hour that they had worked. A plumber. Okay. But then when it comes to a person teaching Quran, we basically would think, well, no, they're supposed to be doing it as a volunteer. You just paid your plumber more than that.
They're still looking for him as kutab.
Exactly. They're still looking for them as kutab and just basically, exactly. It's a very Darvish. Exactly. That's what it is. It's exactly like a Darawish, it's like, Maulana, and this Maula is basically just a person waiting for people's donations. It shouldn't be the case. This person should be given honor because this person holds the Quran, this person holds, and it's really sad to say that, I've had people ask me, do you recommend that I would learn Islamic studies? There were many times that I had said, no, I do not recommend that for you, looking at their circumstances. It depends on the person's circumstance. If you're talking about a degree that will not give you any money, that's going to be Islamic studies. That's going to be Islamic studies. Unfortunately, our society does not honor those with the Islamic studies degrees, even if it's at the highest level. And that's very sad. That's an ummah that's not only in the decline, but that's the ummah in where its own identity is actually at risk of completely losing it. If the ummah doesn't even honor those that have the ilm to maintaining their identity. Those are the people that maintain the identity. Those are the people that learn and teach you their identity. Those are the people that have the keys to understanding the road to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we can't honor those, then what we're seeing is that many of them needing to work as, I don't know, selling falafel or probably working as Uber drivers. You know, there was a professor. I used to teach at the Islamic University of Minnesota. One of the professors used to teach, he was actually a professor in hadith. He was Somali. Okay. A professor in hadith from al-Azhar University, and he got a PhD in hadith, and also, listen to this, got a PhD in hadith with an honors from al-Azhar University. And you know what his full-time job was? You will not believe it. Car wash. He was working at a car wash, and that was his full-time job. You know why? Because the Islamic University, and this is real, you know how much they were paying us? $250 a month. That's not even enough to pay my gas. This is real. This is real. Uqsim billah al-azim. For the whole semester, it was like $1,000. For the whole semester, we're talking about 4 months. This is real. And certainly, working at a car wash was going to be better. At least you'll be getting paid almost, maybe almost $2,000. Hey, this is real. $2,000 a month working at a car wash. It's definitely going to pay you a lot better than working at Islamic University and barely making $1,000 per 4 months. If we can't honor like this professor, who's a professor in hadith with an honors, PhD in hadith, and from al-Azhar, that's where we're at. That's where we're at. It's extremely sad. And usually these people are shy to speak of what I am saying. They're usually shy to speak of it because, one, they would be feeling at pain to speak about it because they would feel that people won't understand. So why talk about it? That's number one. Number two, they don't talk about it because it was going to be misunderstood by many, thinking that this person's seeking a donation. And definitely, they're not seeking a donation. They don't want to feel that somehow is treating them like they are in need. They're not in need because they have the services. They're not seeking people's mercy. They're seeking people's honor for what they have, not people's mercy. And there's a huge difference. To seek someone's mercy is to treat that person as a disabled. But to seek someone's honor is to recognize the value of what they actually have and what they had worked hard to achieve, which is that ilm. These people are not seeking anybody's mercy. No, that's an honor that the ummah must recognize. And that's really sad to see that this is the reality of a lot of our imams. They're not given this respect. I do love there is this habit that Pakistanis and Indians have. There would be, I don't know, they would give a special gift, usually a monetary gift, or even if it's, you know, maybe they went on a trip or something, they would give a present to the Quran teacher or to whoever is teaching Islam, etc. And we had a masjid that mainly was attended by Pakistanis and Indians, and we had a special box. It was like a hadiyah, like a gift box for the imams, and that was the hadiyah box that they would get. So kind of like, I don't know, a tip. I don't know what they call it, but you know, that was actually something that I thought was a way to honor the ulama, and I love that about those masajid. Quite interesting. Let's see. She said, what if the younger one memorized the Quran and they had a higher portion of the Quran? So if the younger one memorized the Quran, I would say it depends on how young. I would probably give them certain privileges sometimes, but not always, because it depends on, you know, how young. If I'm talking about, let's say, an 8-year-old memorized the Quran, okay, I don't expect an 8-year-old to actually know the fiqh of salah, okay? So I wouldn't necessarily put them forward, okay? And I would, even if they had memorized the Quran, and I have, for example, someone that is maybe 16-year-old and, you know, somebody that has more of sunnah, I would consider the fiqh over somebody that probably memorized the Quran and doesn't really understand what the Quran is saying. Okay. Children, when they memorize the Quran, they don't necessarily understand what it's saying. They just memorized it, but they can know a few words. But then even if you were to explain the words to them, they usually just want to rush and just, you know, memorize the ayat and don't give me all the details of what the meaning is saying and all of that. They don't usually have the patience. Okay. Usually. That's not all. Very mature children will have the patience, but you know, you don't always get very mature children to actually have the patience for seeking talab al-ilm. Okay. It is 11:27. Should we continue this, or would you want me to end right here? I'll ask you. So vote on it, I guess. Okay. So you tell me. Write it in the chat. If you want me to continue this, we'll continue. You want me to end right here and continue who's the invalid imamate? Invalid? What? Why would you call it invalid? I would not translate it as invalid. No, I would actually call it as the not preferred imam. Maybe, or the imam that.
Are they referring to a woman? Like,
are they I don't know. Would you want me to continue to know more?
I don't know. It's almost bedtime for us. So.
Almost bedtime. Okay, so we'll continue next week. Inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you a good bedtime. Those that don't qualify, okay, there you go. Those that don't qualify to be an imam instead of an invalid. You know, that sounds, when you say an invalid imamate, I don't know. You just can't. So I don't know. That word absolutely is the wrong word. Tell me in the chat what the right word should be. In Arabic, it says في من لا تصح إمامته في الصلاة. Whoever is not qualified or who is not permitted to give and make and be an imam in salah. That's what it means. Not invalid. Tell me in the chat, or tell me, you know, tell me what you think the word should be. All right, so this is it, inshallah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نستغفرك ونتوب إليك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت. Stay tuned, inshallah, for following class. Inshallah, we'll see you all in our fiqh of worship tafsir tomorrow. Don't forget about that one.